This morning I'm going to talk to you about the world as it is, as the changes that have happened to us. And it's going to be a tale of two men called Karl. And we'll go to the next slide, which shows us the two Karls. One, perhaps the more modern looking one, is the very important Christian theologian of the 20th century, Karl Barth. And he described Christian ethics as the great disturbance. And I really like that idea that God disturbs us and takes us out of our comfort zone. And it's a long way from the other Karl, who you probably recognize as Karl Marx, who said that religion is the opiate of the people. And that's sometimes translated as masses. Religion is the opiate of the masses. And an opiate is something that sedates us or puts us to sleep. And unless I'm having exactly that effect at the moment, I would contend that that is untrue. Currently, the one thing we do know about is disturbance in our lives. No one has had a life which appears even vaguely normal in comparison with what we were doing this time last year. Because I record everything I might like to watch on TV, I always have a surfeit of programs, and I'm still watching things recorded in 2019 and 2019 and even 2018. And I look at pictures of people huddled together in restaurants and theatres. I've seen people getting onto packed trains and marvel that we ever did things like that without giving it a second thought. How carefree we were then, without thought of masks or social distancing, able to hop on and off a bus or pop into a shop whenever we felt like it. At that very first Downing Street briefing we had, I remember them saying that we would be very fortunate to escape with 20,000 deaths. I was so shocked to hear that number almost being spoken of in passing. But now we know that the reality is much, much worse. Our lives have been shaken and changed to their very core, and there is no end in sight. I fear that the breezy throwaway line from the Prime Minister that it will all be better by Christmas is just him playing to the crowd and has no basis in reality. What has been interesting is that although churches have been shut, people have looked to the church and to God for sustenance and support. Online congregations have grown, and people have discovered prayer in a way they had not experienced before. And the next picture shows us a church. During a telephone call I had recently with a friend who lives near this church, which is Farm Street Catholic Church in Mayfair, she told me that when she goes out for exercise, she often sees people kneeling and praying on the pavement outside the closed doors of the church, because social distancing means that they cannot all go inside. This is not some poor village somewhere. This is the most expensive and sophisticated area on the Monopoly board. We have been deeply disturbed by what has happened. But out of this, some good has come. Homeless people were straight away taken off the streets and put into the empty hotels, where they had facilities that they could never have dreamt of previously. They were clean and fed and had privacy and comfort. The question that now has to be asked is, how do we put them all back on the streets and square that with Christian ethics? I'm reminded of the words of Jesus on the next slide. The disturbance that we have felt in the last few months has changed our thinking. And Jesus said in Matthew chapter 25, "When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?" And the king will reply, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." The Christian ethics, which we are so fond of claiming as part of our heritage, came to the fore. And we saw people, the length and breadth of our country, going the extra mile, and even sacrificing themselves to help others. This was not religion dulling people's senses. This was making them more acute. Faith mattered, and the disturbance it had caused had made a difference to people's lives. I was very intrigued to read a poem written by a very young man called Tom Roberts, and I'm going to read that poem to you now, beginning with the next slide. The poem is called "The Great Realization." Tell me the one about the virus again, then I'll go to bed. But my boy, you're growing weary, sleepy thoughts about your head. Please, that's one of my favourites. I promise just once more. Okay, snuggle down, my boy, though I know you know full well the story starts before then, in a world I once dwelled. It was a world of waste and wonder, of poverty and plenty, back before we understood why hindsight's 2020. You see, the people came up with companies to trade across all lands, but they swelled and got bigger than we could ever have planned. We always had our wants, but now it got so quick. You could have everything you dreamed of in a day and with a click. Next slide, please. We noticed families had stopped talking. That's not to say they never spoke, but the meaning must have melted and the work-life balance broke. And the children's eyes got squarer, and every toddler had a phone. They filtered out the imperfections, but amidst the noise, they felt alone. Next, please. And every day the sky grew thicker, till we couldn't see the stars. So we flew in planes to find them, while down below we filled our cars. We'd drive around all day in circles. We'd forgotten how to run. We swapped the grass for tarmac, shrunk the parks till there were none. We filled the sea with plastic, because our waste was never capped. Until each day when you went fishing, you'd pull them out already wrapped. And while we drank and smoked and gambled, our leaders taught us why it's best not to upset the lobbies, more convenient to die. Next, please. But then in 2020, a new virus came our way. The government reacted and told us all to hide away. Next, please. But while we were all hidden amidst the fear and all the while, the people dusted off their instincts. They remembered how to smile. They started clapping to say thank you and calling up their mums. And while the car keys were gathering dust, they would look forward to their runs. And with the sky less full of planes, the earth began to breathe, and the beaches brought new wildlife that scattered off into the seas. Some people started dancing. Some were singing, some were baking. We'd grown so used to bad news, but some good news was in the making. And so when we found the cure and were allowed to go outside, we all preferred the world we found, the one we'd left behind. Old habits became extinct and made way for the new. And every simple act of kindness was now given its due. But why did it take a virus to bring the people back together? Well, sometimes you got to get sick, my boy, before you start feeling better. Now lie down and dream of tomorrow and all the things that we can do. And who knows, maybe if you dream strong enough, make some of them will come true. We now call it the Great Realization. And yes, since then there have been many. But that's the story of how it started and why hindsight's 2020. This is not the best poem I've ever read, but I think it does sum up what has happened. We have been disturbed. We have changed. And now we must pray for the great realization to stay with us. Pray that the levels of pollution that drop so much can be retained. Pray that we continue to be thankful for what others do for us. Pray that we can enjoy spending time with families and friends that we once took for granted. Pray that one day we will touch and sing and worship together in our church. And so I come back in the last slide to Karl Barth. And he said that to clasp the hands in prayer is the beginning of an uprising against the disorder of the world. So let us put our hands together and thank God for his ability to disturb our lives and make them better, and also begin our uprising against the disorder of the world.